Welcome back to the Coruscant Nights podcast. Thanks for joining us. I'm Cooper. Joining me as always is Jack. And today we are re-ranking the live action series for Star Wars. Last time we did this was after Ahsoka.
Yes.
And we've had the Acolyte since then, and we also rewatched Obi-Wan Kenobi. So we thought we'd update you on our opinions. We're going to rank the shows on the categories from cinematic masterpiece all the way down to hot garbage. And so we'll have some updated opinions. Before we get into it, make sure to follow us on social media at Coruscant Nights. A big special thank you to our patrons who support us as always. If you want to learn more, there will be a link in the description, or you can use the QR code on the screen right now. And one last announcement, thank you very much for 400 subscribers on YouTube. We appreciate that. We are trying to hit 500. That was an end-of-year goal for us, but we definitely see it as possible within the next few months. So,
hopefully,
help us out, hit subscribe, and thanks a lot, as always. So, all right, we're going to go in release order for the shows.
Yep.
We'll have a tier list running alongside so you can keep track while we're talking. So let's start with The Mandalorian Season 1. That was 2019?
I feel like it was
2019. It was alongside The Rise of Skywalker. So, when do you rank Mandalorian Season 1?
So, recently I have been praising Mandalorian Season 1, I think, a lot more than what I initially thought at the time of release, because now with all these other live action shows, I think I've started to get a bit more of an opinion about some of these. Honestly, don't know if it's going to surprise you. I'm putting it in cinematic masterpiece.
Wow.
Now, the reason why is because I think it is the most focused out of all the Mandalorian seasons and a lot of the other live action shows, because I think what every single one on this list struggles with is their short run times and short episodes lists. But I think this one here excels in that format, like the best out of all these, or maybe one of the best out of all these. And I really liked how it was more narrow focus around Din just trying to do one simple mission with Grogu, or at the time we didn't have a name for him then, didn't we?
No, Baby Yoda.
Just Baby Yoda. So I really liked how it felt more gritty, grungy, with escaping kind of on the run with this prize asset. And then in the future Mandos, it became a bit more, open.
Yeah,
connecting to a lot more,
a
bit more connected to the actual galaxy and the universe as a whole. When this one felt a lot more just insular, kind of on its own,
isolated from the rest of the Star Wars. I mean, it was the first live action TV show we'd gotten in Star Wars, so
and I thought it hit off with a great start.
Absolutely.
So, honestly, just with some of the scenes we got, the dialogue wasn't really that cringy or kind of a bit over the top. It felt very raw. I really liked kind of the emotional aspects to it.
Yep.
And overall, I just think, in simple terms, it was the most fun I had, honestly. Okay. It was a really good time watching it at the time when Rise of Skywalker was alongside it. And
something good actually came out.
Yeah, and I was like, if this is how... And honestly, when it first came out, I was like, if this is how live-action Star Wars shows are going to go, we're in for a good ride. And maybe that wasn't the case.
No, well...
But I think this has to be one of the most focused Mandalorian seasons and very good live-action Star Wars show.
I agree completely. I think it's a great show. I think I'm going to put it in a good tier. I don't rate it as highly as you. I do rate some other seasons of The Mandalorian a bit higher. The reason that I like this season are for the reasons that you've described, that it felt very isolated by itself, and that it felt very focused on a story it wanted to tell. It was very much character story, whereas the rest of the shows kind of feel a bit more unfocused with who they want to follow. So we had a centralized character, well, I guess centralized two characters, who really carried this show through 8 good episodes. But what I really struggled with is that some of the episodes really lacked for me. I think back to episode 5, which I believe is the Gunslinger. That's the one on...
Yeah, that was...
Is that Tatooine?
That was the worst one, probably.
I don't like that. And a couple of... I think episode 2 as well. From memory, I don't think I like episode 2. But there's some really good standouts. The Sanctuary episode's really good with Gina Carano, and then the last 2 episodes, Reckoning and the Redemption? Yeah. Are really good as well. So not quite the cinematic masterpiece or TV masterpiece that we would expect, that I would expect, but certainly a fantastic season. It set the standard, and I think that a lot of shows after haven't really been able to match that. So the fact that they came out of the gates with something really solid is really commendable. 100%. So good tier for me. And now we move into season 2 of The Mandalorian. That was the next one to come out.
So I remember vividly with this one, all the promotional material, like, in my head the most, because they kept showing Din fly off that rock part with his jetpack, and I'm like, oh, we're gonna get the Din jetpack. I don't know if you remember the trailer, but he always he jumped off the thing and went. Zoom.
Wasn't it season 3?
No, this was season 2, I think, wasn't it?
I don't know what you're talking
or
about.
Maybe it was season 3. Look, maybe did he? Yeah, maybe no. He got a jetpack in season 3. My bad. Was it?
No, he got a jetpack in season 1.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he did.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he did.
When?
He flew
right at the end.
with
Right at the end. Yeah, but
yeah.
I'm talking about when we're actually going to get him to use it instead of the TIE fighter bit.
Okay.
I know he obviously got that then, but in the promotional parts of season 2, I remembered him flying off the cliff and the thing. I'm like, oh, we're going to get a lot more kind of flight.
I think I know what you're talking about.
A lot more, a lot more flight aspect to Din, obviously, which is a lot more Mandalorian focus. In the end, I don't think we really got that. I know it's a little minor thing. I'm going to have to put Mandalorian season 2 in good. Not saying that it's bad or anything, but as Cooper was saying before, how season 1 was a lot more focused. This one, I felt like it did try to rely heavily too much on cameos with Bo-Katan, other Mandalorian factions, trying to find who this Jedi is that's going to take Grogu. I thought the end of season 2 was I think it was a lot better than season 1, because it left the door open for a pretty good season 3, I thought.
Yes.
And then this next show after
Book of Boba Fett happened.
And then that's when the birth of the channel began. But it was more just, I think it didn't know what it wanted to be. It didn't really have one identity. It kind of drew away heavily from season 1 in terms of being a lot more bounty hunter focused, and then I thought Din became a lot more useless in this season. This is when my opinion, Din became a lot worse of a bounty hunter. Like, people nowadays still in today's media still consider him one of the top bounty hunters. He relied so much on Grogu to save him and do everything for him almost, or other people. Like Bo-Katan, all of them have helped him, in their own way. He has not really done a really good feat on his own.
Well, maybe not that we've seen, and also he probably did it off screen, but I guess that's kind of what we wanted to see, in all honesty.
Like, how are you building up this, I feel like the only reason why he's so popular and what's it called, strong, is because of his armor. Compared to other bounty hunters.
The Beskar is certainly helpful, isn't it?
I feel like that saves his butt a lot, and my issue is that I feel like he gets sidelined quite a bit in this season. No, don't get me wrong. The reason why it's in good, and I feel like it's probably in the top of good almost for me, or up there around, is because of how cool the action scenes are. And the visuals, I thought, got a lot better from season 1. I thought they definitely tried to heavily rely more on the, I keep forgetting, every time we talk about...
Fan service.
No, the way they film. Stagecraft.
Stagecraft.
Stagecraft. I always forget the name when we go to record. I always forget it. But I think they tried to go a lot more into this, and this is where I think a lot of these live action shows start to show their flaws.
Oh, absolutely.
They start to show their flaws a bit, but then one show in particular picks it up again, which is good. But I think, this had a lot of fan servicey moments. Very good. However, I think it's not as much focus on The Mandalorian, which is why I loved The Mandalorian to begin with, and season 1 more.
Okay. I don't disagree with you. I think that this is definitely the start of the kind of pattern that we detract from The Mandalorian away from The Mandalorians. And that's obviously something we get into in season 3. I didn't really take that much notice of it, and maybe it's just because I'm actually quite like this season. I rank it in Cinematic Masterpiece. I think it's the best of the Mandalorian season, and the reason I think it is because there's only one really crappy episode, in my opinion.
Which one's that
Which
one?
is episode 2, the one on the ice planet. They crash, and the spiders,
I
and the X-Wing pilots. Yeah, Carson Tava.
I thought that was a pretty good one compared to some other ones, I feel.
I didn't like it.
Well,
You got my favourite episode of all time for The Mandalorian, The Marshal, Season 2, Episode 1, with Timothy Oliphant? Or is it Daniel Oliphant?
No, Timothy.
Timothy, yeah. Fantastic. I love that one. But what I really love about The Mandalorian Season 2 is that it's the first time I felt like that this shared universe in Star Wars has really come together. Where on earth are you going to see, besides Return of the Jedi, Luke Skywalker, Boba Fett, Bo-Katan, and who am I missing? Someone else. I can't remember. Anyway, when are you going to see all of these characters share the screen together?
Boba doesn't really share the screen with Luke, though.
That's true. But no, they're in the same show, isn't it?
Yeah, same show.
They're just, even the concept of it, getting all of these characters together is just mind-boggling. And I think they pull it off so well. And I understand that maybe Din is sidelined, but the story of getting Grogu to this Jedi is still primary.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe there's not that character development, but definitely I feel like it's still a very focused story. and it just sprinkles in, and actually it doesn't sprinkle in, it utilizes these other characters really well and brings them into the story for a fantastic finale. And that's why I rank this series so high. I remember checking in every single week, as you did, wondering who this Jedi was going to be, wondering who these cameos were going to be. I remember seeing Boba Fett in episode 1.
Yeah, technically.
And we're like, oh, okay. I did not expect him to show up again. And then he was a main focus for pretty much, well,
I was hoping he would
the
show
rest
up,
of the series.
because I feel like that would have been just like one of those
tease.
Which a show recently did, kind of just shows up and then never spoke about it again. But yeah.
Well, I wouldn't even say they're cameos. I would say they're supporting characters. So
yeah, they're supporting characters.
I think The Mandalorian Season 2 does a fantastic job. I think, obviously, behind Heir to the Empire movie that we're going to get, it's the best use of bringing multiple characters from different areas of the Star Wars galaxy together. So I loved it, besides that one episode. So yeah, I rank it as TV masterpiece.
Yep.
Your favourite show is next.
Hot garbage, Boba Fett. Whack it in. Down the bottom.
Yep.
It ruins a good character, or at least a premise of an interesting way for the character to go.
Yep.
And they somehow make it boring. They somehow use the worst dialogue I've ever seen. They somehow put in futuristic, colourful bikes in a deserty, very openly daylight area, and then also make it look like it's the slowest chase scene of any chase scene I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yep.
It's just, why is he sleeping? Why is he sleeping every 2 seconds in the he's still not healed. But then Mando Season 2, he's kicking butt and taking names, and he's still back to, I'm like, oh, they're going to set him up good. The post-credit scene in Season 2 where he takes out Bib Fortuna, sits on the throne. Oh, we're going to get a godfather for Boba Fett in Star Wars. How did that turn out?
Yeah, not great. I think recently they've been advocating that Season 2 do happen. Tomorrow has been pushing for Season 2, which I'd like to see. So hot garbage, that's right. I'm putting I'm putting it in the bad tier. I don't think it's hot garbage.
No.
I really like, my favorite episode is not any of the Mandalorian episode. I think I mentioned this in a review we did or maybe the other live action video we did. But I really like the backstory stuff with the Tusken Raiders and the spiritual journey. I don't know what it is about it. I mean, consider I've only watched this show once. So
Twice.
Maybe if I rewatch it, I would have a different opinion. But my initial opinion is that I like the backstory. I like the exploration of his character and where he got to. I like the exploration of how he got out of the Sarlacc pit. I like how he went for revenge against... Who did it? Was it pirates?
The Pikes.
The Pikes, yeah. And yes, most of the series is forgettable. The finale, I really like the finale. It's a long finale. It's an hour and something.
It's serviceable.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the word I would probably use.
And it has one of my favourite characters in Star Wars, one of my favourite bounty hunters.
Yes.
Fennec Shand.
Oh, what? I was thinking of a cat. I was like, yes.
No.
Oh,
I'm a Fennec Shand stan. I love Fennec Shand. So obviously that's going to bump it up a couple notches. I'm putting in the bad category. It's not a good show. It's not perfect. There's some redeemable moments. There's some redeemable characters.
Well, to be honest, I could go on for days about this. I think we are going to obviously rewatch this show again for a future one.
Yep.
And then that's when we'll get more into the gritty because, wow, I've got so much pent-up anger from the show.
Reimagining Book of Boba Fett is a podcast coming soon.
Yes. So.
Yep. All right.
One.
We collectively agree it's a bad show.
Yeah, it's bad.
All right. Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Okay.
Holy moly.
Bad.
Okay.
I'm not putting it in hot garbage solely for the fact that I can't put Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen together to show again in a hot garbage category.
Fair enough.
I think this one here had the most potential to go wrong because of how weirdly placed it is in between these two movies and how they're going to make Obi-Wan get off. Everyone knew, how are they going to get Obi-Wan off planet? Then they did the weird Leia chase scene again. 2 in a row of the worst chase scenes I've ever seen. It is not serviceable. It is bad. It is simply bad, and it's very poor from the showrunners honestly standpoint. I think the acting from Obi-Wan and Darth is not bad. I think there is some very questionable lines, and I think a lot of the CGI in this show was very bad. I can't ever get that out of my head where Darth's in that throne in Vader's castle and it just looks it looks like Spy Kids.
It looks like Spy Kids.
It
does
looks
look like Spy Kids.
But I was going to say Robert Rodriguez, he was for Boba Fett. I was going to say because he did Spy. But no. I think this show had so much potential to go wrong, but it also had so much potential to be fun. and very what's it called? I wouldn't say fan service, but kind of to see them fight each other again.
For some reason, our audio cut out, so the rest was re-recorded on Zoom. Here you go.
Here we are again, continuing up from where we were up to last. So, Obi-Wan, I class it as bad. That's because primarily I can't put Hayden and Ewan in the hot garbage category, considering how iconic they are to obviously the franchise and us as audiences. I was mentioning before our audio cut out how I wouldn't call it like cameos or fan service kind of thing. It was more the fight, seeing them fight at the end was just sort of a bit of a rehash, kind of nostalgic kind of feeling, because we obviously are with these characters for a long time in the Clone Wars and also when we see them in A New Hope. So I think aside from the really poor writing, the really poor plot, and the really weird time frame it's kind of constrained itself in terms of like you don't want to retcon anything or anything. I think it did okay in terms of being somewhat enjoyable, but you can't overlook so many of the negatives, like I said before. And I think that really comes from just not having a clear vision of where it kind of wanted to, or what it wanted to be, I think. Because it went through so many rewrites and so many different kind of script ideas of being a movie, a trilogy, then a series, and then not even an 8-episode one, a 6-episode one. So I think with all that in mind, it does have to be in bad. And it's kind of sad to have to put a show called Obi-Wan in bad, but it is what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Look, I mean, this is my least favorite show of all of the series. I've made that very clear, even in the Obi-Wan reimagining video that we did.
Yeah.
This is so bad. I can only take a few positives out of it, and that's like, I think Ewan and Hayden's performances are really good. But like what you were saying with Obi-Wan, like the show and not feeling very thought out, it feels like the Acolyte in a sense, because it's like it feels like they had the idea of what was going to happen or what they wanted, but then they didn't know how to make it 6 episodes or eight
Yeah.
episodes in terms of the Acolyte. So for me, it doesn't feel like a Star Wars project, even though it does have like the characters in it, like Vader and like iconic characters that make it feel like it's immersed in the
Mm.
Star Wars galaxy. It really doesn't feel to me like it's that quality that we expect from Star
Oh
Wars,
yeah.
both visually and with, the writing and dialogue and everything. So
Yeah.
yeah, Obi-Wan is my least favorite series, and I rank it in the hot garbage just simply because of over the last 2 years now that it's been out. I don't think I've been more disappointed with a show, and I definitely won't be watching it again for a long time. So
Oh,
yeah, Obi-Wan
savage.
Kenobi sits way down below for me. That the reimagining one is the last time I needed to watch it for a while. There's just too much wrong in my eyes with that series.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's where I sit
I
on
mean,
Obi-Wan.
it is what it is. Like we said, it was trash, and I think a lot of people kind of all agreed on that.
Mhm.
Our next one's one of our favorite ones, of course. I
Hell
think we're
yeah.
both unanimously in agreement that we both place this one in cinematic masterpiece at the very
Absolutely.
top of the tier. I
Hmm.
think we always mention, because we made so many videos kind of along the lines of Andor and obviously Rogue One, and how these two projects especially have such a consistency with its acting, dialogue, screenwriting, just directing in its whole entirety.
Hmm.
This is shot on location for the most part, and it is beautiful. When you see those Star Destroyers in real kind of world environments and landscapes, it's just chef's kiss.
Yeah.
And I think we weren't really, I mean, I know, I think you might have been too at the first. When they first announced this, we weren't really like excited for it,
Yep.
because like Andor, like why about a whole show about one sort of small character in Rogue One? But being the birth of the rebellion, basically, just seeing all the nitty gritty behind the politics and all the kind of side characters to who we normally tend to follow in these movies and shows is just, it was such a treat to see. And I really can't wait for season two. And I hope season two really kind of caps this off nicely and makes this a really, really perfect follow up kind of
Yeah.
whole, as a whole.
Well, I think obviously we've spoken about Andor a bit across our journey. Obviously, our second ever
Yeah,
episode was about Andor.
literally.
Recently we speculated about like what Rogue One characters could be showing up in Andor season 2, and we did get the confirmation that Ben Mendelsohn is coming back
Yep.
as director Orson Krennic, which is
Hype.
exciting.
Hype.
That is, yeah, it is hype. It's gonna be amazing to see how he interacts with characters like Dedra Meero and who am I missing on the Empire side? Cyril,
The
Cyril,
yeah, Cyril,
Cyril.
the
Yeah,
ISB dude. Yeah.
yeah. God, that I don't know why I
Ah,
can remember that. Yeah, so that'll be good. And look, we've gone on about the writing and everything like Jack was saying before. I think that for me, it feels the most complete. This show,
yeah.
it feels like everything was planned out from the get-go. It knew what it wanted to be, it knew what it wanted to show, it knew what the characters' journeys were going to be, and it felt like they were all leading to this one point at the very end when everything kind of crosses over. So that's what I really appreciate about Andor. And even more, I don't know if I mentioned this about Andor before, probably have.
Mm.
It's the first time in ages that I've felt like the Empire is an actual threat.
Oh yeah.
It's like
Yep.
they're actually a menacing group. They're like in forceful nature, they're iron grip. And especially after the Aldani arc and the heist and the prison sentences are becoming more harsh and Andor gets sentenced for just for walking. Like
Yep.
that's just crazy to me. So it shows how ruthless the Empire is and you can't trust them.
I think it puts perfect emphasis on how the Imperials can be more threatening to kind of lower level and lower capable kind of people,
Hmm.
like just sort of general kind of civilians. Because I feel like when we follow so many Jedis or smugglers or bounty hunters against the Empire, it always makes the Empire look very weak, but that's
Yep.
because they are also very good in their own fields. So I think seeing the this kind of difference really helps aid to it.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. Yeah. And look, I mean, we'll cover Andor season 2 when it
Oh, 100%.
comes out, and we're looking forward to that. We believe it's probably going to be March, April.
Early, hopefully. Yeah, next year.
Well, I mean, I guess we'll find out, but with
Yeah,
Skeleton Crew coming out later, I suppose
we never know.
there'll be that gap. I don't know. I don't know. We'll wait and see. All right. Mando season 3. I don't
Yep.
think this is one either of us are looking forward to
Hot
rehashing.
garbage. Hot garbage. Put it in there. Whack it in the slot. Mando season 3 is utter trash. It is. I can't believe someone like watched all that show, like that whole season, and was like, "Yeah, we made some bangers here. Like this. This is what we wanted to make when we thought about Mando. And yeah, let's bring in Grogu and have him, uh, have a shortened kind of time with Luke and to absolutely do nothing in the whole season, to be no relevance to the plot whatsoever. Like at that point, it was like, is this even about Din? Like, is this season
Yeah.
even about Din? Barely. It's about Bo-Katan and her people
Yep.
and the Darksaber. Then ultimately, the Darksaber being ruined basically at the end. Moth having a cool re-entrance, but then to just be thrown away like garbage, like a
Mhm.
typical cheesy early 2000s villain. It's just the writing in this season and the weird decision making, like having a whole episode around the battle droid mystery and having Jack Black and Lizzo be kind of ruling over a place is just so. It's not Star Wars esque, and I think that's what's annoying.
Yep.
This season felt so forced to just come out for the sake of coming out and putting out another thing rather than to actually be good.
Hmm.
This just really infuriated me after
Yeah.
two very strong seasons from a show to have such a massive fall off is not acceptable.
Yeah.
It is by far, in my opinion, the worst live action show
Wow.
series or season that we've gotten. It is. I would rather watch Obi-Wan, like I said before, purely for the characters.
Okay.
But Mando is a good character in my opinion. However, I don't think he's like one of my all-time favorite ones. So when the show went, when the season went so bad instantly with weirdest decision making and CGI stuff at some points, just
Yeah.
no, get out of here, get out
Yeah.
of here.
I don't think the intrigue was there for this season. I feel like
I'm
the premise that they were establishing was like, oh, please forgive my transgressions. I'm gonna go bathe in the mines
gonna
on
go
Mandalore.
bathe.
It's like that's not interesting. Season 2 was captivating because we knew we were leading to a Jedi. Season 1
Mm,
was interesting because it was the first live action Star Wars series we'd ever gotten, and it was following a fan favorite, well, a character from a race,
mm.
or like a fan favorite race of Mandalorians. So it was the intrigue, and it was a bounty hunter, and it had a lot of potential and promise, and it
Yep.
delivered. So yeah, it wasn't delivered. This season wasn't delivered very well. Wasn't executed very well. And the only reason I'm going to put it in the bad category is because I want Obi-Wan to rot by itself down in hot garbage.
So
I
mean.
I genuinely can't. That show infuriates me. That's how I feel with Obi-Wan is how you feel with this season.
Yeah,
I
fair.
just I Another thing, I'd like to watch this season again
Yeah.
just to see if it's as bad as I remember.
I will
Be-
do it in our
Yeah, we'll
series.
have a reimagining Mandalorian season 3 or
Yeah.
reaction. But yeah, because that was the first season we covered on the channel that we did. But no, Jack's pretty much covered all of the points. I think the thing that
Yeah.
really, tipped the scales for me and was like, oh, really, was the dark saber and Bo-Katan winning on a technicality. Like
Yeah.
that's just stupid. There's so many points in history that could have happened. It's like Kanan. Kanan beat Sabine technically
Technically,
in a fight, even though it was
he,
training.
he earns it.
Yeah, and so didn't the armorer beat um Mando in Book of Boba Fett?
Oh, that was training, wasn't it?
Yeah, but like
But
I
if
don't know,
yeah, yeah,
same
if you're
sort of
gonna
deal. It's like
yeah,
it's just strange. It's
yeah,
I feel like they wrote themselves into a corner and were like, oh
how do we
damn,
do
how do we
this?
get out of it? Oh, let's
Yeah,
just go back on all of the fundamentals and all the rules that we established
yeah,
very early on. So
100%.
yeah, Mando season 3 is bad for me. It probably
Yeah,
would go in hot garbage, but yeah, I can't. I want to let Obi-Wan sit down there for eternity.
that's fair enough. I mean, moving on, like
Yeah.
people may people may like watching this tier list, and especially after all these are done, might be like, Jack, why are you so critical? Like, why are you so critical on
I'm
all
wondering
these
that.
things? Like, this is because I'm not settling for mediocrity, and even below that, it is not even mid. However, the only one on our list so far that I consider the most middest of mid is Ahsoka.
Yep.
And I'm a bit sad to say that because I think there were probably more positives than negatives. It's just the negatives that I have with it are kind of larger scale than a lot of the positives. For example, I think the storyline of it was really good. It had such a cool storyline, but then it got dragged out for like the whole. It was like one mini storyline expanded across the whole season when it didn't need to be. It
Mm.
needed to be just like a half a season thing and then progress into something that we weren't really aware of. And I think this is what the issue with these live action shows are is that they have such a small concept and try to drag it out and or have a pretty large concept and just rush through it. It's
Mhm.
like they can't find the sweet spot. And I think we have a lot of good aspects from Ahsoka. For example, we get really good acting from Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka, even though I don't like the older Ahsoka kind of vibe. I think she did it a really good job. I thought Balin and Shin were such a good what's it called introduction into this world, and they fit perfectly right into this story. I like Thrawn, but here's another negative. It's I am sick of having Thrawn say every time he loses, it's a win.
Mhm.
It's just not though. He lost, but he's saying it's a win, and I'm like, you can't just blame everything to be planned out the way you want it. Like
Yep.
it's a bit cheesy when it gets to that point. But I really did like some of the visual aspects of this, and I thought the music and the sound design, and I actually really like the lightsaber fight scenes a lot in actually this show. I thought it had a nice blend of kind of sequels, which is weird because I don't like sequels, but sequels and originals rather than prequels and originals,
Yep.
which I think one of the shows does that we're going to be talking about next. But I think this one has a nice kind of lead into like from after what's it called, the originals into the sequels. It's got that transition kind of period which adapts both styles. I think a lot of obviously the cameos I thought maybe some people might just say they're forced fan service, but I really, really love seeing Anakin and Hayden Christensen come back as not Darth, but as Anakin, which I thought was really good. It's just the ending and where it left off and how it just dragged out one simple storyline to basically the end of this season now has basically left us where we began just with different characters
Mhm.
swapped around and we kind of predicted that and that's what really infuriated us because it's like why would this be their best outcome for
Yeah.
this season? And that's what really bothered me and why it's not going any higher than mid.
Fair enough. I'm gonna agree with you. I'm gonna place it in mid as well. When I think of average shows, I think of this.
Yeah.
It had some good aspects, like you've already mentioned, but even for me, I think that it had such potential to be
Mm.
this groundbreaking combination of all of these different projects to come together, which it does feel like that. Obviously, we have the Rebels and
Yeah.
Ahsoka and the New Republic with Mon Mothma and Carson Taver's in there as well.
Yeah.
And so it does feel like this big crossover. But at the same time, like you were mentioning with the story, it feels very one-dimensional. It's we got to find a map to get to Thrawn, who's in another galaxy. Oh, but we're going to make that take 5 episodes. And then when we finally get over there, there's no sense of urgency or time to get back, and they just miss out. So yes, there were good consequences, but it's like it was like it's like with the Acolyte, which we'll mention in a minute. It
Mm.
was a concept that should have been resolved in a couple of episodes that was stretched out into 8. And
Yeah.
that's where I think a lot of projects really falter is because they just they try to go too in depth with a really simple concept.
Yeah.
And so that's why Ahsoka is middle of the road for me because it just doesn't nail the fundamentals. But it does have, I think, the Rebels, and especially Sabine. I know you don't like Sabine in this show, but for me, being one of my favorite characters coming from Rebels and seeing her in this show and played really well, is just it's really nice to see. And same with Ezra as well. Not that Ezra was one of my favorites, but just seeing him be as charismatic as he was in Rebels now on the screen. It was a dream come true, really. So that's where I'm kind of standing.
Mm.
It is a mid show. It's very difficult to cancel out the good stuff with the bad stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's where I stand on it.
Yeah. Look, all valid points. I think some of the characters' decisions are questionable, in my opinion, on how they were going to progress into, and now to kind of reverting back to where they are. But it is what it is. Um, Obviously, this last one for our what's it called, for our tier list ranking of the live action series for now, because obviously Skeleton Crew will be coming out later this year,
Yeah.
and we obviously get to doing Andor season 2 hopefully when that comes out early next year, hopefully.
Hmm.
Um, we have talked about this a lot this show. The Acolyte,
Hmm.
obviously. We just finished it. Just a sigh. Honestly, I'm not gonna make an emphasis on it. Just quietly whispering it. Hot garbage. There
Wow.
we go. Hot garbage. Let's just put it in there. Honestly, it doesn't feel like Star Wars to me. It felt very forced fan film of someone's one particular person's idea of what they wanted to see on a big screen compared to what a complete executive decision would feel like. I feel like this person obviously is Leslie Headland. I feel like they really wanted to put their own spin on Star Wars with using concepts from already pre-established media from the franchise itself, but making it not as good. And I think this is where it lacks a lot of creativity and identity, whilst also forcing really boring and unusual plot like progression and development with following the twins who aren't really twins, but then to basically swap their roles every 2 episodes, they're going back on their decisions and then eventually swapping at the end. And then you've got the stranger, who is a very cool, interesting character, which we all obviously probably wish we got more of him. But then you don't progress with that. And then it's like, well, you've got one good character, and maybe if you're going to argue, maybe you got Soul too. Maybe I just think he's way too over the top with his emotions. Like I was saying to Cooper, like every time I think of Soul, I just think of him saying "Osha," like
Yeah.
"Osha." Like
Oh.
he's always just like obviously, it's just how he was portraying the character, but way too emotional. Like, come on, Soul, you're better than this. But I think maybe 2 good characters, if that, within a whole show, and they're not really like the main plot of where the show wants to go. It's just that shows how weird the decision making process was for every other little bit that we saw. I hated how it took so long to kind of get to like one outcome when I thought it should have been resolved earlier. I can't believe you split 2 episodes that are flashbacks of the same one, but like way further apart and just worse. If you merge those 2 episodes together, the flashback episodes, and cut down on the garbage we didn't need to see, it could have been a better episode. I don't understand why they have to like fix within certain run times and kind of episode lists. Like, who cares if a show goes to 9 episodes, but it fits everything in perfectly, doesn't rush, has good pacing? Like, I don't understand why Disney are forcing kind of this agenda with runtime, strict runtimes and strict episode lists. It really bothers me, and this show suffers heavily on it. And I think it's just a lot of forced ideals with a really poor creative idea, and it lacks an identity. And that's simple as that. And that's why I can't put it in bad, because I'm not taking one good character out from a show and being like, yeah, that makes it into a bad rather than hot garbage. The lightsaber fights were neat. I liked them. Slow mo still a bit on the fence about. I really liked how they went for a more fluid,
Yeah.
like the prequels, which I really obviously liked being a prequel fan rather than like a what's it called, slow, heavy kind of strikes. Like I didn't like the Kalnaka fight because of the heavy strikes. I know it's probably in a Wookiee nature, but yeah, I really did like for the most part the choreography, but there wasn't enough of it to even boost that once again into the bad category. It's still hot garbage for me, but you probably all heard, everyone listening already heard my opinions throughout
Yeah.
each episodic weekly review.
Yeah.
But yep, that's my take.
All right. It's a shame we have to end with a project that is
Yeah.
not great. I'm putting it in the bad only because I liked the idea of this show and the concept, and I thought the execution we need to think about the execution in different ways. The execution visually and the execution normally.
Mm,
Um, I think they absolutely nailed the aesthetic of the time period of the High Republic. And that's what I think of when I think of the Acolyte. I think of bright um, costumes and colors and a bright galaxy and a hopeful galaxy. And that's kind of the message of this time period. I liked that we get to see some of what is translated from the books or what's in the books translated into this show. I liked some of the character personalities, but again, there are negatives to that. And while you weren't a big fan of some of the lightsaber combat, I appreciated that it at least tried to be engaging. I'm using a lot of positively connotated words here,
yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
like
Not
make
descriptive,
it
but
sound better. No.
positive.
Um, so there is those positives, which makes it a bad project for me. But yeah, I think it was episode 6 or maybe episode 7. I can't remember. But I got to the point where I was being very optimistic. I'm like, okay, I'm still liking what they're doing. It's not exactly what I hoped, but they're still kind of digging into little bits that I kind of like. But one of those two episodes just got me in the end, and I started thinking very negatively of the show. How did they not expand on such a interesting concept and storyline?
Mm.
How did they not make these two main characters more interesting
Yeah,
and give
literally.
them awful motivations every single episode? How do you leave an episode on such a tease of two iconic characters and not even think to utilize them in the show from the start? It's just a bunch of things that I think, okay, the show was bad, but these could have made it a whole lot better and actually entertaining.
Yeah.
Because, like what you were mentioning, I feel like most people have an issue with the characters and the story in the show, right?
Yeah.
I feel like if you insert characters that people recognize and you do them justice and you make them as interesting as they are in other projects and you give them a story and dialogue that fits the concept that you've got, but also pushing for something entertaining and engaging for the audience. And I know that sounds like easier said than done,
Mm.
but I almost feel like they chose out of the 5 options they could have had, they went with option number 5,
Yeah,
and
literally.
it was not the best option. So,
Horrible.
look, I think I might think differently of the Acolyte in maybe a year's time when we've had time for it to really settle. But for the
It gets worse.
moment, there is enough in there for me to go, there is some redeemable stuff in this show. So I'm putting in the bad category. That was probably a major over explanation of my thoughts when I could have just said, go check out the other
Yeah.
podcasts. But that's
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 good.
kind of my summarized thoughts on the show.
Yes. But
Yeah.
that is our what's it called general thoughts of each one of these little projects. Obviously, before, prior this podcast, or even after in the future, we'll go more in depth about certain things, and
Mhm.
that's the beauty of having free range of choice on how we want to kind of make content and talk about our opinions. But
Absolutely.
I enjoyed that. That was good. Aside
Yeah.
from our little debacle, which
Yes.
is quite funny. But
Yes.
yeah, no, it's been
So,
good.
all
It's
right.
good.
Thanks for listening and checking out the video. We will see you next week.
See ya.